I'm Andy Davidson, I'm the Nature Recovery Officer. I work with the Countryside Service, part of Hampshire County Council. We're at Shortheath Common. It's part of the Selborne parish. We're actually right in the edge of it. And there's a famous ecologist who lived nearby at Selborne, who wrote the natural history of Selborne back in the 1700s. And one of his journal entries in 1791, I think, mentions the field cricket. 300 years later to the day, it was down to one site in Sussex. It was the only site left in the country. I talked about being on Shortheath Common. Now, common is a particular type of ground, and it's very sandy here, and generally commons are pretty poor ground. They're not very good for general farming or cropping. Mainly all they were good for was grazing animals, apart from cutting gorse and things, products from that. But after a certain time period, people found it far easier to put cattle on a nice green field. It was far easier to find. So the grazing and other activities declined on these places. And slowly over time, the trees come in and take over. You need the connections in the landscape, and that's one thing again with nature recovery looking for, because you get little isolated pockets of habitat. It's called fragmentation. So this sort of heathland, on this edge of we're in the Weald, which goes through Sussex, Surrey and Hampshire. There would have been patches of this all the way under the chalk, all the way round through Sussex and up through Surrey. And there'll be little dotted patches of this all the way. But it might have been built on. There's bits housing building on some of it, not on this common, but on bits nearby. It's been planted for forestry, and it becomes fragmented. And if they become too far apart, there's no way they can move around. Because they're very easy to breed in a tank if they're a sunny place. You just need a male and female, and then the female just lays her eggs in the ground. And all the tiny, they're called nymphs. They're not like with butterflies where they lay an egg and then it becomes a caterpillar and a pupa. The crickets, what they do is they lay an egg and that hatches into a nymph, which is like a little tiny cricket, and that grows up in several stages. And then you can release them on a site like this. Started with just a couple of us, say, just with a sunny windowsill in our house breeding their fish tank. And then Natural England became involved, and actually London Zoo. And they took over the breeding in their insect houses. And of course they can do it in a much bigger scale than we can. So they can produce more insects to put out into the field. And more sites became involved as well. So the National Trust, the RSPB, and others, private landowners as well. And they're now in Sussex and Surrey, Hampshire here.
Hi, I'm Nicki. I'm the Countryside Team Manager for Hampshire County Council Countryside Service. I started with Hampshire County Council as a ranger back in 2001. As part of my job, I looked after Shortheath Common, so this was one of the sites that I looked after. My line manager at the time, Andy, was heavily involved in the field cricket project, and they decided that they were going to do a further release. They'd already done one in 2000, and they were going to do another one in 2001. So really, my job was really just to get involved with that. This particular site at Shortheath Common, this is probably one of the areas that the field cricket favours the most. As you can see, generally the turf is quite short, it's quite patchy, it's quite sandy. So we tend to manage this area by mowing, so we will mow it every year. Not all of it, so we'll manage different patches so that obviously we're keeping the habitat right for field cricket, but we're also keeping it right for other things as well. So I think the field cricket project has had quite a significant impact on the local community. I think a lot of people, with many species, a lot of residents kind of hear a noise and they're kind of like, oh yeah, I hear that all the time, or I wondered what that was. But to actually be able to give a name to something like the field cricket and to be able to explain to them and help them to understand its importance, and then they grow a love for that species as well. It's been absolutely fantastic to be part of the project. This was one of my sites when I started as a ranger. I still have a real love for the site. It's fantastic, and the field cricket is part of that. To come here for a very short period of time, they're only here really or you only hear them singing really for about 6 weeks every year. So to hear that sound is really very, very special. Yeah, so if anybody wanted to get involved more with the field crickets, we do, like I said, have a runner transect twice a year, so helping us get involved with surveys. We have a lot of sites to manage. We don't just manage Shortheath Common, we manage lots of other sites as well, so we have surveying to do across all those sites. So if anybody was interested in helping us surveying, also keeping the management of the habitat right, so it's not just doing the stuff directly with field cricket, it's actually doing the background work to keep the site in the right condition. so people can come along and help us with scrub cutting in the winter. If people want to get involved, if they go to the Hampshire County Council website and Countryside Service, they can search for volunteering, and you can click on the link down here below.